speak so little they fear your voice. Nietzsche. You were not born angry. You were made this way by a world that mistook your silence for weakness. They laughed when you spoke softly, mocked your stillness, feared nothing about you, until they saw you stop needing their approval. In the frozen dark, where wolves sharpen their teeth on failure, you began to change. Not louder, not softer, but colder. The boy died when no one noticed his pain. The man was forged in that funeral. You are not here to be liked. There is a fire no one sees. Not the kind that blazes out loud. Not the kind that begs for attention. No, this one burns quiet. Buried. Beneath the ribs. Behind the silence in your eyes. It started when you were young. The moment they misunderstood you. Laughed at you. Dismissed you. Told you to calm down when all you wanted was to be heard. Told you to speak up when you were just trying to stay safe. You learned to bite your tongue. To lock the chaos inside your chest. To wear the face that made them comfortable. While a storm brewed in the silence. Somewhere between being too much and not enough. A numbness grew. It didn't arrive with a scream. It came quietly. Like winter creeping in through the cracks. And in that frost something shifted. The warmth you once begged for, approval, affection, understanding. You stopped chasing it. Not because you didn't want it. But because you realized it would never be given to you freely. Men like you are forged in isolation. You don't heal by holding hands. You don't heal by being understood. You transform in the fire, alone, unseen, unapplauded. The pain you once feared, that's not your enemy. It's the forge. The crucible, the heat that strips away who you were. So you can become what you must be. That ache in your chest, the one you buried so deep you forgot it had a name. It wasn't weakness. It was the sound of your steel being smelted. You are not breaking. You are being remade. And the man who crawls out of that fire, he doesn't beg. He doesn't explain. He doesn't even speak much. He moves like shadow, calculating, precise, unapologetic. He understands that emotions are tools, not crutches. That silence isn't emptiness. It's strategy. Because when you stop needing the world to understand you, you become ungovernable. When you stop flinching at your own darkness, you become untouchable. They think the man who feels nothing is lost. They're wrong. He is the most dangerous of all. Because in that void he found focus. In that cold he found fire. And in that silence, he learned to listen to something deeper than noise. Something ancient. Something ruthless. Something sovereign. Now, he doesn't look for warmth in others. He burns from within. And every step he takes is a move on a chessboard. They don't even see. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about building a world so unshakable that even the betrayal that started it all becomes irrelevant. He doesn't chase peace. He becomes the storm that ends the war. And the next time they look into his eyes, they won't find the boy they dismissed. They'll find the man they cannot control. That is the fire that forms you. And the moment you stop running from it, you stop being a victim. You become the weapon. You become the war. You become the last silence before the reckoning. There's a moment when a man learns. Kindness doesn't always return kindness. Loyalty doesn't always earn respect. Sometimes it earns silence. Sometimes it earns a knife. You gave too much. You stayed too long. You hoped too loud. And what did it cost you? They saw your kindness as naivety. Mistook your discipline for submission. Every time you offered softness, they took something sharp in return. Until eventually, you stopped bleeding. Not because the wounds didn't cut, but because you no longer felt the need to show them. You stopped flinching. You started watching. Every man craves a throne. Not for applause, not for attention, but for dominion. To command, not to convince. But here's the part most never understand. Not every throne is made of gold. Some are forged in silence. Yours is, because the man who controls his voice, controls the room. Not by volume, not by presence, but by restraint. You used to overshare, thinking it made you honest. Thinking transparency earned trust. But all it ever did was make you predictable. They read your mind like an open page, used your thoughts as weapons, twisted your words into chains. And still, You kept explaining yourself. Why? Validation. A silent addiction most men carry. The hunger to be understood, to be approved, to be seen. But now you see what it cost you. Every time you spoke to justify yourself, you gave something away. Leverage, mystery, dominance. Because power does not explain. It doesn't need to. It simply is. You've learned to speak less, not because you have less to say, but because you finally understand the value of silence. Now every word is a weapon. Every sentence, a move in the game. Calculated, measured, minimal. Like a general surveying the battlefield. You don't waste energy. You wait. You let others fill the silence. You watch them reveal their hands while yours stays hidden behind your back. Silence is social gravity. The less you give, the more they lean in. They try to read you. They guess. They project. But they never fully know. And that is your power. The man who can't be read, can't be controlled. He becomes a cipher, a mirror, a shadow walking through fire. He speaks as if every word costs blood, because he knows it does. Each word you offer now is a calculated risk, a sacrifice, because once spoken, you can't take it back. Once known, you can't be unseen. So why speak what doesn't move the board? Let them wonder. Let them doubt. Let them build stories in their head. That's what power does. It lives in the unanswered. It breathes in the pauses. It thrives in the silence, between what you know and what they'll never hear. This isn't arrogance. It's strategy. A man who's mastered silence has mastered himself, because silence requires control, discipline, restraint. Anyone can scream. Anyone can argue, defend, plead. But the man who can sit in stillness, while the world pulls at his sleeves, he is the one they'll follow, or fear. You've spent years broadcasting your mind, believing openness was strength. Now, you hold it like a knife behind your back. And in that quiet you built a throne, not made of gold, but of restraint, of stoicism, of moments you could have spoken, but didn't. Let others chase being seen. You're here to be undeniable, because when you speak now, it echoes, it stings, it stays. And the man who commands the silence, commands the room. So remember this, the weak speak to be heard, the strong wait to be understood, and the sovereign, he speaks as if every word costs blood, because it does. They thought leaving you behind would break you. They called it rejection, abandonment, failure, as if being cut from the herd was a curse. But you know better now. Exile was never punishment. It was the beginning. The silence they feared, you made it your sanctuary. The isolation they ran from, you turned it into an altar, and the cave they left you to die in. That's where the crown was carved. Not in the noise, not in the crowd, not in the comfort of belonging. It was in the darkness, alone, unseen, where no one clapped, no one checked in, no one cared. And in that brutal stillness, you met yourself. The real one, not the version you performed for approval, not the one shaped by other people's comfort, but the raw presence beneath it all, the shadow behind the eyes, the voice beneath the noise. You stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped reaching for the hands that never reached back. And in that space, you studied, not books, not trends, not others, yourself, every flaw, every pattern, every scar you kept hidden in the folds of performance. You mapped your weaknesses like a tactician. You watched your mind move under pressure. You confronted every ghost that screamed in the dark. And you didn't flinch, because exile gave you a gift no crowd could offer. Clarity. When no one speaks, you finally hear the whisper that's been buried beneath years of noise. And it tells you exactly who you are, exactly what you're capable of, exactly what needs to be done. Exile stripped away your excuses. It silenced the distractions. It removed every comfort that once masked your stagnation. And in its place, it gave you the edge. The kind that comes from suffering with your eyes open. The kind that doesn't beg to be seen, because it knows it cannot be ignored. The kind of edge that turns silence into strategy, isolation into focus, and pain into posture. Because you didn't die in that cave. You were refined in it. While they drowned in noise, you became fluent in silence. While they searched for acceptance, you studied dominance. And now, you wear exile like armor. You move like a man who needs nothing, because he has already faced everything. There's no bitterness, only precision, only presence, only purpose. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You expect it. You no longer crave being included. You've outgrown it. You don't speak unless it's necessary. You don't move unless it shifts the board. You've turned withdrawal into warfare, and restraint into reign, because the throne you sit on now was not given. It was earned, carved, not with privilege, but with pain, not with praise, but with solitude, not with applause, but with the quiet rhythm of discipline, repeated in darkness. That's what they'll never understand. You didn't rise from admiration. You rose from abandonment. You didn't become sharp from being supported. You became sharp from being severed. And now, every room you walk into feels it, not because you make noise, but because you've mastered the silence they all ran from. So when the world tries to pull you back, into comfort, into conformity, into chaos, remember this: the crown was carved in the cave they left you to die in. Who are you when no one's watching? Not the man they think you are. Not the face you wear in rooms that demand smiles. Not the version you soften to make others feel safe. I mean the real you, the one beneath the skin, the one who survived the betrayal, who swallowed rage in silence, who rebuilt himself in darkness, without applause, without witnesses, without mercy. There's a difference between men who are shaped by the world and men who shape themselves in spite of it. You stopped wearing your heart on your sleeve, because every time you did, someone took aim at it. So you did what survivors do. You covered it. One insult at a time, one betrayal at a time, one cold shoulder, one silent goodbye, one failure that carved deeper than words. Each became a plate, each became a rivet, each became steel, until the man you once were was buried beneath armor. This wasn't bitterness. This wasn't some theatrical rage. This was war, and you adapted. You didn't choose softness. You chose precision. You chose control. Because empathy, without boundaries, is self-destruction. Compassion, without discipline, becomes a weakness they exploit. And you've learned, not everyone deserves access to your softness. They didn't earn it. They don't respect it. They weaponize it. So now you move different. You feel, but you don't flinch. You see everything, but you reveal nothing. You've put your pain in cold storage, not to forget it, but to wield it. Stored pain becomes fuel. It becomes focus. It becomes clarity. So sharp, it cuts through lies, noise, and illusions. You stopped reacting, because reactions are for men still hoping to be understood. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be undeniable. So you walk into rooms with armor, instead of apology, and you don't ask for space. You create it, not with noise, with presence. They feel it, even if they don't know why. The stillness in your posture, the silence in your eyes, the unshakable energy of a man who's already died once, and rebuilt himself, stronger, colder, smarter. There's no glory in staying soft for people who keep cutting you. There's no nobility in being open in a world that trades your vulnerability for leverage. You learned, you adapted, you refined, and now, you don't owe anyone access to the man you had to become to survive them. They don't get to see what it took. They don't get to touch what it forged, because your scars aren't for display. They're not stories. They're not sob songs. They are armor, and the man who wears them, he no longer needs to explain himself, because he isn't here to be seen. He's here to move, quietly, deliberately, undeniably. And when the moment comes, when the noise rises, when the tests return, he won't crumble. He won't explain. He'll just tighten the armor and walk through the fire like he always has. Because beneath the skin, there is steel. And steel doesn't beg. It doesn't bend. It doesn't bend. It doesn't bleed for the same people twice. The mirror doesn't blink. It doesn't soften. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't care who you told yourself you were yesterday. It reflects, brutally, silently, exactly. And most men lie before it. Not with words, but with silence, with excuses, with narratives they've rehearsed for years. You tell yourself you're tired, burned out, overwhelmed, but you're not tired. You're misaligned. You're not lost. You've just been lying to yourself. So long that the truth feels like betrayal. But it isn't betrayal. It's awakening. Because the man in the mirror, he sees through your performance. He knows when you're pretending to care. Knows when you're chasing validation instead of purpose. Knows when you're moving out of fear disguised as discipline. You think the world lied to you. But what if the loudest deception came from your own mouth? What if the enemy wasn't the noise around you, but the voice inside that keeps telling you to wait, to be patient, to accept what you've outgrown? What if the weight on your chest isn't fatigue, but the pressure of being half alive? Look deeper, strip away the costume, the nice guy mask, the curated ambition, the I'm okay smile. Now tell me, what's left? Who are you really? Not who you want them to see. Not the role you've mastered for survival, but the man in the raw, without filters, without armor, without distraction. Can you look him in the eye, hold his gaze, or do you blink like the cowards, who never confront their own shadows? The mirror is a battlefield, and the first blood drawn is your illusion. Every time you refuse to look, you strengthen the version of you that keeps you weak. Every time you distract yourself with dopamine, you delay the reckoning that could set you free. This isn't about shame. This is about truth, unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic, because until you face the truth, you don't own yourself. You're a slave to the mask, to the performance, to the identity crafted from fear and comfort. And a man who lies to himself can be controlled by anyone, but the man who doesn't blink, the man who sits in front of that mirror without flinching, without numbing, without running, he becomes unstoppable. Because nothing anyone says can wound deeper than the truth he's already faced. He doesn't need permission. He doesn't chase applause. He doesn't trade his soul for peace. He sharpens himself, ruthlessly, 7 days. No distractions, no validation hits, no noise, just you, the mirror, and the facts. What are you running from? What have you refused to name? Where are you still lying? Write it, stare at it, own it. Because that's the work. That's how transformation begins. Not in motivation, not in hustle porn, not in performance, but in confrontation, in silence, in stillness. You either kill the lie, or the lie kills the man you were meant to become. So the next time you stand in front of the mirror, don't fix your hair, fix your alignment. And remember, the mirror never lies. It just waits for the day you finally stop lying to yourself. They misunderstood your silence. They thought it meant weakness, confusion, uncertainty, a void to be filled, a gap to be exploited. But silence isn't absence. It's presence, unseen, but undeniable. They didn't realize they weren't watching you retreat. They were watching you reload, because every word you didn't say was a weapon you chose not to waste. You stopped giving your mind away for free. You stopped bleeding in conversations that were never sacred. You learned the discipline of stillness, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew not every moment deserves your voice. Silence became your edge. While they spoke to be understood, you listened to gain leverage. While they reacted, you calculated. Because the man who doesn't rush to speak doesn't play by the same rules. He's not trying to be liked. He's not trying to be chosen. He's already chosen himself. And that kind of man, he becomes a storm in a quiet room. Every pause you hold builds pressure. Every glance you don't explain becomes a mirror. They start unraveling, guessing, filling in the blanks with their own fear. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just protect you, it destabilizes them. Because people don't fear the loud ones. They fear the quiet ones who watch. The ones who listen without flinching. The ones who speak only when it shifts the entire board. You've seen what happens when men broadcast their every thought. Predictable, exposed, easily provoked. But you learned to hold the frame, to create tension, to let others exhaust themselves trying to decode you. They call it mystery, you call it control. Because you're not here to be readable. You're here to be remembered. And silence is unforgettable. Noise fades. It blends, it evaporates, but silence lingers. It echoes in the mind. It gnaws at the ego. It leaves space for impact. You are not silent because you lack power. You are silent because you've mastered it. You are not hiding. You are sharpening. You are not shrinking. You are choosing when and where to strike. The less they know, the less they can predict. And the less they predict, the more they fear what's coming next. Because silence isn't surrender. It's a trap, a setup, a signal that the rules just changed. And when you finally speak, they'll feel it. Not because you said more, but because you said only what mattered. Like the rumble before an earthquake. Like the stillness before the kill. That's what your silence becomes. Not a wound. Not a scar. Not a shield. A sword. One you forged in solitude, honed through restraint, and now carry with deadly intention. So when they question you, when they push for reactions, when they demand explanations you don't owe, pause. Let them feel it. Let them fill the silence with their own unraveling. And remember, silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of power. There is a kind of man they cannot touch. Not because he's invisible, but because he's untouchable from within. His world is not dictated by emotion. It is designed by strategy. Not cold in spirit, but cold in control. He feels, but he does not obey the feeling. He wants, but he does not chase the want. He knows the terrain of desire, but he does not kneel before it. Because somewhere along the path, after the betrayals, the lies, the chaos, he learned what most men never do. Fire creates noise, but ice creates control. It wasn't always this way. He used to burn, with passion, with anger, with the unfiltered chaos of a man trying to be understood in a world that only listened to silence. He reacted, quickly, emotionally, predictably, and every time he did, they pulled the strings. They read the patterns. They pressed the buttons. So he stopped. He didn't stop feeling. He stopped leaking. He didn't stop wanting. He stopped revealing. And in that decision, a layer of ice began to form over his instincts, not to freeze him out, but to shape his mind into something sharper, something surgical, something still. He speaks less now, not because he lacks words, but because he chooses them like weapons. Each pause he holds is a calculated reset. Each delay, a silent declaration that he is in control. That's the rule now. 3 seconds. 3 seconds before any reply. 3 seconds before any reaction. 3 seconds, where emotion is scanned, sorted, stripped of impulse, because the man who can delay owns the pace. You can feel it when he enters a room. Stillness without stiffness. Presence without performance. He doesn't need to prove his strength. His restraint does it for him. And while others seek emotional rescue, hands waving in a storm of validation, he stays rooted, observing, listening, calculating. Because detachment is not disconnection. It's leverage. It's what allows you to see the game, while others are still reacting to the last move. It's what keeps you sovereign when the world tries to bend your frame. This doesn't mean you're numb. It means you're focused. You're not above emotion. You've just trained yourself to sit with it without being puppeteered by it. And that makes you ungovernable. Because when your mind is forged in ice, you don't get lured by chaos. You don't flinch when others panic. You don't unravel just because the world is loud. You wait. You measure. You strike only when it shifts the outcome. That's what they'll never understand. They think your quiet is emptiness, but it's pressure. They think your distance is indifference, but it's design. Because power isn't in the explosion. It's in the delay before the detonation. And the man who masters that delay, masters himself. He no longer rushes to fill silence. He lets silence speak for him. He no longer explains. He implies. He no longer hopes to be understood. He ensures he cannot be predicted. And that's the edge they can't decode. So when you feel the fire rise, breathe, pause, let it burn beneath the ice. And when you move like a storm hidden in snow, sharp, silent, certain, because the mind forged in ice doesn't shatter, it cuts. There comes a moment when the war inside you goes quiet, not because the battle is over, but because you've mastered how to move through it without flinching. You don't raise your voice anymore. You don't rush to explain. You don't chase respect with performance or noise. You've become something else now. Not louder, not bigger, just sharper. You've spent enough time shouting into rooms that never listened, trying to prove yourself to people who were never worthy of your truth. Now, you let silence do the work. You've refined your presence, condensed your power, sharpened every thought until words became weapons, not wasted. When you speak now, it's not for applause, it's for impact. You don't drop opinions like breadcrumbs. You deliver facts like detonations. Words that cut through rooms. Words that shift weight. Words they remember days later, long after you've gone. Because you've become the kind of man they lean in to hear. Not out of curiosity, but out of caution. The fear isn't in your tone, it's in your restraint. The less you speak, the more they wonder. The more they guess. The more they project their own fears onto your silence. And that is control. That's sovereignty. You no longer need to assert power. You radiate it. Not through dominance, through discipline. You're not cold by default. You're cold by design. Because warmth, without boundaries, becomes weakness. You've studied the room too long to waste energy, trying to belong to it. Now you build your own frame, and let them orbit you. That's the truth they never expected. The man who was once desperate to be heard, no longer needs to speak. Not unless it moves something. Not unless it ends something. Not unless it builds something that silence cannot. You've become the prophecy they didn't see coming. The most terrifying voice is the one they never expected to speak. And when you do, you don't yell. You don't rant. You don't beg. You deliver, with precision, with posture, with presence so heavy it makes the loudest man in the room feel exposed. This isn't about becoming someone new. It never was. It's about remembering who the silence was trying to awaken. The man who speaks so little, they fear what happens when he finally does. Comment forged if silence made you dangerous.